After the assassination of Charlie Kirk, many are wondering where our country needs to go from here. These are a few of my thoughts from the last few days. For Christians, Charlie Kirk's death was a martyrdom. He died for his faith because his faith drove him to political action and put him in the crosshairs of political violence. For those who wished death on Charlie, for the one who fired the gun, and for those who celebrated Charlie's assassination, his death was a human sacrifice. Imagine a barbaric pagan tribe cutting the throat of one of their enemies in a ritual meant to honor the tribe's death-hungry gods, and all the raucous tribesmen cheering with delight as the sacrifice is made. The Neo-Marxists cheering on Charlie's death are no different. They killed him to appease their ideology. They sacrificed him to appease their gods. I'll explain exactly what I mean by that and why exactly they killed Charlie Kirk in a little bit. But first, we must note that history teaches us the best way to end human sacrifice, the best way to bring peace and order out of the chaos of violent and incoherent belief systems is to make your nation truly a Christian nation. Charlie Kirk spent his life arguing that America's founding was a uniquely Christian project, from the Bible's influence on our government structure, to the faith of the founding fathers, to the Christian declarations in the original state's constitutions. Charlie argued, as John Adams argued, that our government was made for a Christian population. And the reason we're in a national crisis right now is because our original Christian government intended for a Christian nation are both lacking the Christian part. Separation of church and state is a phrase Americans hear a lot. Just as a reminder, it's not found in the Constitution, but in a letter written by President Thomas Jefferson. Today, people quote that phrase like an incantation, a spell that will protect America by warding off the Christian nationalist boogeyman, preventing religion from taking over their fair and free democracy. But those who use it in that way fail to realize that the phrase originally warned against institutional churches combining with government power in order to dictate how Americans practice Christianity, meaning the phrase was meant to protect Christians and churches from government influence, specifically to stop your state and local government from enforcing a regionally specific form of Christianity. It was not supposed to protect the government from being influenced at all by Christian sensibilities. American governance has always been strongly influenced by Christianity. Every single influential early American figure was culturally Christian. The Constitution grew out of the ancient soil of Christian culture. And Christianity's cultural power is still vital to the United States' existence today. Let me be clear. I am not making a case for Christian nationalism because I believe the Christian church needs the United States to protect its interests in order for Christian culture to survive. Far from it. The Christian church has survived 2,000 years and will be here in another 2,000 years, regardless of which way the U.S. goes politically and culturally. On the contrary, it's not the church that needs the nation, it's the nation that needs the church. Without Christian culture being dominant, the United States will not survive. As Jesus taught, the greatest is whoever is the servant of all. Christianity is a servant to the nation because Christianity is greater than the political system itself. And Christianity has long served the whole world, and the Western world in particular has benefited greatly. In his book, Dominion, The Making of the Western Mind, the Oxford-trained historian Tom Holland compellingly argues that Christianity civilized the Western world. Christianity turned a society that by today's standards was barbaric and cruel into one that's compassionate and operates by fair and blind justice. Western Christian culture created hospitals, universities, orphanages. It increased literacy. It educated women, something unheard of by other cultures. And it put laws in place to protect the most vulnerable. Globally, where Christianity spread, it ended cruelty. It ended human sacrifice, including the practice of burning widows alive after their husbands passed away. After hundreds of years, Christianity replaced paganism and barbarism in Europe. And in its place, it created the greatest nations the world had ever seen. European Christianity eventually gave rise to philosophers who developed classical liberalism. Although they had some great ideas about enshrining human rights and preventing kings and governments from stepping on those rights, they unfortunately developed philosophies that would eventually lead people to believe that all humans are decent and the same, regardless of culture. when in reality, the sameness that they assumed was something that had been developed for centuries within the Christian nations. That same decency did not belong to the marauding Moors with their numerous child wives, and it still does not to this day. That same decency did not belong to the human sacrificing Aztecs. Over the years, the Christian nations began to lose their Christendom, and suddenly that decent human sameness disappeared. The paganism and barbarianism was allowed to return, and it returned with a vengeance. Human sacrifice made a comeback. Like the liberal French Revolution that saw rivers of blood running through their streets, those rivers of blood became all too common from progressive revolutions the world over. Nations must have a culture, and if they won't cling to a peaceful one, they will inevitably fall to a violent one. America needs a Christian culture because America needs a peaceful, unifying societal story. That's what culture is, a societal-wide story that connects us together and allows for a trust-based economy to exist. America has always historically had this, and the unifying identity of a shared group has allowed us to form a stable nation consisting of different racial groups. But without a Christian culture, America is left with just the empty culture of liberalism and the anti-culture of Neo-Marxism. Liberalism is an empty culture. It's an obsession with individual freedom above all else. You believe what you believe, I'll believe what I believe, and we'll leave each other alone and not bother each other. This is not a unifying story. It's the absence of one. It's not freedom, it's isolation. America has been sold the lie that somehow what connects us together is that we have nothing in common. We have no shared value, no shared story, no shared language, and no shared culture. We're all atomized individuals, keeping our deepest beliefs to ourselves and not pushing them on anyone else. We're a post-nationalist state, post-culture, and post-Christian. This includes the lie of multiculturalism. Having nothing in common is what we have in common, and we're expected to believe that somehow this will create a great and stable nation. But nature abhors a vacuum, and society abhors a cultural vacuum. So this empty culture of liberalism has instead simply made room for the death cults. It's led us to the much more compelling and unifying anti-culture of Neo-Marxism. Neo-Marxism is an anti-culture because it has never created anything successful for itself, but instead it is obsessed with the dismantling of Western civilization. That's the unifying story for the neo-Marxists, or AKA the woke. Let's all get together and destroy our Western world, throw away our Christian sensibilities, burn down every semblance of a stable society. This kind of story is short-sighted, builds nothing, destroys everything, and the unity only lasts as long as they have a common enemy, which is why those on the left are so quick to turn and eat their own. They need enemies to unite themselves. They're not defined by what they create, but by what they destroy. This is why America used to be the best in the world at building things, and now we're only good at burning things down. Let me be clear. This is why the neo-Marxists killed Charlie Kirk, and it's why they celebrated his death. Ideologically, they measure progress by how much of the Western culture they destroy. Western culture is uniquely Christian. It's in its application of a well-balanced biblical principles that govern your individual life, your marriage, your family, your community, and your government. Charlie Kirk championed Christian influence over all of these things. So his removal was seen as a direct win for the woke, or a direct win for the neo-Marxists. If America is to be saved from the destructive tendencies of neo-Marxism and the isolating tendencies of liberalism, we need a culture that is greater than both of these things. We need a resurgence of Christian culture. America needs Christian nationalism because that is simply the presence of a Christian culture that legitimately cares for the health of the nation. Christian nationalism is the will to make Christianity the dominant culture of America yet again. And without Christianity being the dominant culture, the nation is lost. With Christian nationalism vacated, our nation's political and cultural leaders have undermined our nation's unity and interests at every turn. They've shattered our unifying identity. They've destroyed our ability to create wealth, all for the benefit of some globalist political game. And now They tried to sell us on more liberalism, more multiculturalism, more Neo-Marxism to solve the problems that these ideologies themselves have created. But it's not multiculturalism that made the US the most inviting, open, and successful nation in the world that makes so many want to move here. It was the Christian sensibilities that made us good neighbors. It was the Protestant work ethic that created marketplaces of abundance. It was Christian culture that made our societies safe enough to develop high trust, complicated economies that didn't need to be hampered or micromanaged by an overbearing government. Here's just one example of what Christian nationalism can do for our nation. The globalist-minded ruling class long ago decided that cheap labor akin to slavery is an absolute necessity. So we were not allowed to protect manufacturing and resource extraction here at home, but instead we gave that away to other countries who practice child labor and slave labor, or things akin to slave labor. And now we buy from them. Now, that same ruling class has the gall to criticize traditional Christian American culture for once participating in slavery. Yet it was the Christian sensibilities growing to their natural fulfillment that ultimately abolished slavery here in the West. And now, those same Christian sensibilities that include justice and common sense want to end illegal immigration, because many of the issues of illegal immigration includes it's an importation of a new cheap labor class for the benefit of corporations that are unconcerned with modern day slavery. And yet, liberals condemn us for this political stance, even though our nationalist interests would end human trafficking. So what's the alternative to a strong Christian culture? What's the alternative to Christian nationalism? Well, we get a glimpse of where we are headed just by looking at Europe. So Europe's secular, empty culture of liberalism right now is being steamrolled by the much stronger, much harsher culture of Islam. Now, in nations like England, trust is at an all-time low, and violent tribalism is making a massive comeback. Progressives believe that we can replace Christian culture with an open society, utopia, where everyone is free to live their own atomized, individualistic life under the banner of a post-nationalist state. But they are standing out on a limb that Christianity grew. And if they succeed in sawing off that limb, our nations will crash down into a brutal tribalism that they cannot even begin to fathom. They can't fathom it because they've never seen it before, because this is the cruelty that belongs to the age before Christianity civilized the West. And it's now boiling up underneath our feet right now. Progressivism is heralding the return of a violent paganism. Everything American progressives complain about, they have brought upon themselves. They want to eat the rich due to economic inequalities and vanishing opportunities here in the states. But it was the progressive outlook, not a nationalist outlook, that gave away our economic opportunities for the benefit of other nations, exporting our jobs and driving down wages with unchecked floods of immigrants. It was progressivism that forced us to go green by no longer using our own natural resources here at home to generate wealth, but instead be forced to buy resources from other countries, like from China, who's the greatest polluter in all the world. Progressives complain about racism, intolerance, and injustice, but it is what they seek to erase, traditional Christianity that teaches to love your neighbor as yourself. It is by Christian-influenced nations that our justice systems have become more fair. It is the entire catalog of Christian values that keeps compassion and justice in perfect balance, rather than going off into the extremes that cause the pendulum to swing away from order back towards chaos, and away from kindness and back towards brutalism. Again, Christian culture can survive without America. America cannot survive without Christian culture. And you can see this in how any political circle that's not steeped in Christianity will eventually justify violence against their political opponents. And this brings us back to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is a Christian martyr, an unconventional martyr, but a martyr just the same. His crusades on college campuses perfectly symbolize the cultural clash occurring here in America. For years, his enemies formulated an ideology to justify violence against him and his kind. They decided that he, as a Christian nationalist, was a threat to their survival, their species. His hearty words were literal violence, literal genocide, because they attacked the eternal victim class with the cruel weapons of facts, logic, and common sense. They justified in their own circles violence, and they committed actual violence against conservatives, running arm in arm with Charlie, and finally shot Charlie himself to put an end to his hurty words. It's not Christian nationalists fanning flames of violence. Christians condemn murder and political violence and attacking those you disagree with. In Charlie's words, quote, I go around universities and have challenging conversations because that's what's so important, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens, end quote. He chose to keep the conversation about traditionalism, Christianity, and nationalism alive on college campuses instead of allowing those things to just go away quietly, as many wish they would. And he kept that conversation going peacefully, never resorting to violence, though he was threatened with violence at all times. This is the Christian ethic of turning the other cheek, working to build a better world, even for the ultimate benefit of those who hate you and get their power from evil and death. Sprouted from the rich soil of Christian culture, Charlie lived and died fighting for the survival of our nation. We as Christians have to decide, will we pick up where he left off and rescue this nation from the zombie cultures that want to destroy it? We do this by reestablishing Christian culture, not by fighting for liberalism, an endless expansion of atomized, disconnected individualism, but by creating culture, societal stories that connect us together. Christianity in the past has been great at creating stories that connect a people, a country together. We need to find that ability again, to recreate that city on a hill that will draw people together once more in search of a better life. It's the cultureless Americans who need that example presented to them, young and old. And we have a rich history and canon to show them how to create that societal story. We can unify the country under the same Christian values that created the nation and made the nation great, but we may have to pay a price in order to do that. Non-Christians have a fear that Christians want to influence politics in order to benefit Christians, but Christianity has made nations great, free, prosperous in the West, like no other civilization has ever experienced. We want to influence politics because we want our nation to be great. Christianity is the greater, serving the lesser. The state needs Christianity. Christianity does not need the state. Charlie Kirk said about himself, quote, I've never described myself as a Christian nationalist. I'm a Christian and a nationalist, end quote. And I think that's admirable. And I've never been one for titles myself. I don't care if people call themselves Christian nationalists or not. What's important are not titles, but the effects, namely Christianity's ordering effect on our nation. After a tragic, politically motivated assassination, many are asking how we move forward from here. How do we unify the country instead of falling back into tribal violence? The way forward is the same path that has made peace between opposing tribes for 2 millennia. The only path in the West that has stood the test of time. It's created nations that love life and order more than they love death and chaos. The pathway forward is Christianity, and we need greater Christian influence over our politics, over our government, and over our society, not less. The human sacrifices must end, and Christians will be the ones to put a stop to it, just as we have done so in the past. This has been a Filibusted live stream. I'm Reese Black, and I hope that you have a great rest of your week.